The chef isn't coming? What are we gonna do? There's no time left. Shouts filled the kitchen from every direction, blending with the heat, creating a whirlwind of panic and confusion. As I washed the towering pile of dishes in the sink, I listened to the frantic exchanges around me. The water seeped through my rubber gloves, its temperature uncomfortably vivid against my hands. A wedding at sea. A full-course meal served in the unique setting of an ocean voyage with a large number of guests in attendance. And to top it off, the groom was the heir of one of the country's largest corporate groups. The ship was supposed to be filled with a more festive mood than usual from the morning, but behind the scenes, an unprecedented problem was occurring. The main chef was absent. This is hopeless. There's no way we can find a replacement now. Damn it, what do we do? At the very least, we have to start prepping. All around, staff members clutched their heads in despair. Even Thomas, our usually strict but dependable head chef, was at a complete loss for words, as if he had no idea what to do. A creeping sense of desperation spread like flames around the unlit stoves. We were in the middle of the ocean. Going back to shore to find another chef was impossible, and even if we could, there wouldn't be enough time for them to get up to speed. Yet, the clock kept ticking, bringing us closer to the moment when service had to begin. Groans and sighs from the staff echoed like the relentless waves outside. Everyone was on the verge of giving up, convinced there was no solution. I took a quiet breath and clenched my apron, still damp from the dishwater. Something surged within me, pushing me forward. I turned off the faucet, stripped off my gloves, and spoke. "I'll cook." The kitchen fell into a stunned silence. Even the sound of water droplets hitting the sink seemed deafeningly loud. What? What are you saying? Don't be stupid. You're just a dishwasher. There's no way you can cook. Voices of disbelief and outrage rained down on me. I was just the guy who washed dishes in the back. The idea of me stepping up to replace the chef was insane. It was only natural. But I had no way of knowing that this decision right here and right now would change my past, my present, and the future of this ship. My name is Henry Thompson. I wash dishes in the kitchen of the luxury cruise ship Summit. When people think of a cruise, they imagine elegance and leisure, but behind the scenes, the work is grueling and relentless. While passengers dream of their perfect voyage, we, the back-of-house staff, sweat and toil every single day. In particular, in the kitchen, there are strict fire safety and hygiene controls, and it is impossible to predict when the finished dishes will be cleared. If you're unlucky, even after the peak dinner time is over, the dishes will come back in pieces for more drinks or late-night snacks, and it's not uncommon to have to stand at the dishwasher all night. I don't really hang out with anyone. To the other staff on board, I'm nothing more than Henry, the dishwasher. Not that I care what they think. Once my shift is over, I check over the ingredients and tools, then head straight to bed. I wasn't particularly interesting, nor did I have any friends to grab a drink with. That was just the way things were, but lately there was someone who had caught my attention. A woman who had boarded the ship a few days ago was the wedding planner, Rachel. I didn't work in the entrance hall or reception, nor did I have many chances to interact with her directly. Yet for some reason, the entire staff seemed to be buzzing about her. I heard Rachel is a top-tier planner. If she's on our ship, that must mean this wedding is a really big deal. Or maybe she just wants everything to be perfect. I bet she's a real stickler for the details. That kind of chatter floated around constantly. Her reputation was impressive. Despite being young, she had successfully handled numerous high-profile weddings. On top of that, she was beautiful and incredibly sharp, so much so that many of the staff saw her as both brilliant and intimidating. The one time I happened to spot her in the hallway, she had been walking briskly, phone in hand, looking visibly frustrated. She was clutching a small tablet and seemed to be giving instructions to someone, her brow furrowed as she spoke at an almost alarming speed. So the staff around her seemed to feel difficult to approach her. I even saw a staff member hesitate for a second before deciding not to approach her. But in that brief moment, I caught a glimpse of her profile. There was something about her that made the word frantic fit perfectly. She didn't look just angry, and she looked pressured as if she was driving herself too hard. People who seem flawless on the outside often have struggles hidden beneath the surface. That was the thought that crossed my mind, but of course there was no reason for me to get involved. I was just an observer. Or at least, that's what I thought, until the very next day when I unexpectedly found myself speaking to her directly. It was after the lunch rush. With all the dishes finally cleaned and put away, I was walking down the hallway when I felt someone's presence nearby. Usually, this area was bustling with staff and passengers, but in the lull before evening, the place was nearly empty. Glancing in the direction of the presence, I saw a woman sitting against the wall. As I got closer, I realized it was Rachel. Her shoulders were trembling slightly, her face tilted downward. The tablet device was placed carelessly, indicating that she was exhausted. Or maybe she was depressed. Even under the bright corridor lights, she stood out, yet no one approached her. The air around her felt too heavy to break. I don't know if she had a conflict with her staff or if she had trouble with a client, but it would be a shame to leave her like this. "Are you okay?" At the sound of my voice, Rachel's head snapped up. And you are?" "I'm Henry. I work in the kitchen, washing dishes." "Oh, right. Do you need something?" Her voice was weak, but her tone carried a hint of dismissal. I hadn't planned on prying, but I also couldn't just walk away. So I reached for the small water bottle I always carried with me. Inside was a simple herbal drink. The dishwashing staff sometimes made it for a quick breather, though I had my own little twist on it. It helped for fatigue. "Want some?" "What is it?" "It's like herbal tea. I added a bit of mint and lemon, which are good for recovery." Rachel looked at my hand dubiously for a moment. But maybe she was too thirsty to care, or maybe curiosity won over. "All right," she muttered, hesitantly taking it. She took a sip in silence. Then her eyes widened slightly. Another sip. Some of the tension in her face seemed to ease. "This is better than I expected. It's smooth with a sharp citrusy kick, but not overpowering." "Is this lemongrass?" "Yeah, they are lemongrass and mint. There's also a little bit of honey in it." "Ha, but aren't you just a dishwasher? You can make something like this?" Her words had a slight edge, but her tone wasn't harsh. I let out a small laugh. I make it for myself sometimes. It helps me stay awake. Rachel let out a quiet breath, her expression softening just a little. "Thanks, that helped." "It's nothing special. Feeling a little better now?" When I asked her that, Rachel replied with a bitter smile, "Yeah, well." As I turned to leave, about to say my goodbyes, she suddenly looked serious. "Wait, are you really just a dishwasher?" "Yeah, just a dishwasher. Nothing more, nothing less." She looked skeptical, almost as if that answer only intrigued her more. "I see. You're kind of a strange person. You seem a little too calm for a dishwasher. Anyone who is tired from work will feel down. You're the wedding planner on the ship, right? You're in a position of authority and you have to motivate people, so I think it's best not to look too tired. Those below you will worry." I didn't mean it as a jab. It was just some honest advice. But Rachel's brow twitched slightly. Maybe I struck a nerve. She held out my water bottle, her face unreadable. "Here, I'll give this back." I quickly shook my head and pushed it back toward her. "No, keep it. I'll collect it later." She looked like she wanted to say something, but in the end, she just kept quiet. Over the next few days, I buried myself in work as usual. The sink was never empty, and plates and pots piled up endlessly, rising and falling like waves. The kitchen of the luxury cruise ship Summit was a battlefield, its glamorous exterior hiding an intense, never-ending struggle. From morning to night, The chefs poured their skill into their dishes, and we, the back-of-house staff, ran ourselves ragged to support them. Everything operated on a razor-thin margin, invisible to the passengers enjoying their voyage. And it was no different for Rachel. Every day, from early in the morning until late at night, she would grab hold of the staff and give them detailed instructions, and her harsh tone seemed to be causing a backlash. I often see Rachel explaining things to someone across the hallway, and it seems the person sometimes steps back in embarrassment. One day, during a break, I overheard some staff members venting. Seriously, what's her deal? I messed up one instruction and she tore into me like I committed a crime. Yeah, and she keeps shoving this minute-by-minute schedule at us like we don't have our own workloads. It's exhausting. She may have the ability, but it feels like she's just running around on her own. To be honest, she's annoying. I think a lot of people can't stand her. I frowned as their words hit my ears. Glancing over, I saw 2 or 3 junior staff members huddled together, openly bad-mouthing Rachel. Maybe they were just frustrated from the stress, but talking like this behind her back left a bad taste in my mouth. Not exactly pleasant to hear. The words slipped out before I could stop myself. I'd been scrubbing a pan in the sink, but my hands stilled as the staff turned to look at me in surprise. They hadn't noticed I was there. An awkward silence filled the space. "What's up, dishwasher? Sorry, but please be quiet for a moment. We're being serious." A serious conversation? It sounds more like you're just taking turns trash-talking someone who isn't here. Their expressions darkened. I wasn't looking to start trouble, but I couldn't just ignore it. It's true that Rachel may be strict, but I think she's so particular about the details because she cares about the success of the wedding. I know she's busy, but isn't it the only way we can all work together? After I said that, I remembered that I was just a dishwasher and felt a little regretful. Even if I say this, it may not be persuasive. The staff exchanged looks as if they wanted to argue back, but in the end, one of them just muttered, "Yeah, whatever," and dropped the conversation. A heavy silence settled over us. I sighed internally. Just then, from the hallway, there was a faint sound, something bumping into something else. I turned around and saw that the kitchen door was left half open. Someone had been there. A bad feeling crept up my spine as I wiped my hands and pushed the door open wider. There, walking away with her back to me, was Rachel. Rachel. Even when I called out to her, Rachel didn't stop. Without turning around, she picked up her pace, disappearing around the corner of the hallway. I quickly handed my station over to a coworker and hurried after her. When I finally caught up with her after she turned the corner, she was clutching the tablet tightly as if trying to calm her ragged breathing. Her gaze was fixed on the floor, her expression clouded with raw emotion, distress, and frustration. She might even have been hurt. "Sorry, I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, I just came to return your water bottle." Her voice trembled and something about it squeezed at my chest. I tried to keep my tone steady. "Are you okay? Those guys were just venting. They don't actually hate you. I think they're just..." Before I could finish, Rachel shook her head. Her damp eyes flickered up to meet mine, filled with a mix of conflict and uncertainty. "I understand why you tried to argue back, but I know that I can't help it if they say something like that. I know I'm forcing it through, and I can sense that the people around me are tired, but I can't quit. I have no choice but to make this job a success." Rachel was starting to complain little by little, and there must be a lot of pressure on her shoulders. No matter how talented she was, trying to shoulder everything alone was too much for one person. She gripped her tablet like a lifeline and lowered her gaze. When I was in high school, I attended a relative's wedding. I thought it was just an ordinary wedding, but I was really moved. The moment I saw the bride walking down the aisle in her pure white dress, I was so shocked. I realized there was a job that could make people so happy. Rachel narrowed her eyes slightly as she reminisced about her memories and began to speak. The scene from that time must be burned into her mind in vivid colors. The relatives and friends of both families were all smiling. During the ceremony, the groom's friends prepared a surprise, which was a huge success. The whole venue was filled with a sense of unity, and everyone there was smiling happily. I was so engrossed in the atmosphere that I nearly cried. On my way home, I thought to myself how wonderful it would be if I could help create that atmosphere, and that's how it all began. The grip on her tablet loosened slightly, and for the first time, a small light flickered in her expression. It was like remembering her dream was breathing some life back into her. So even when I was job hunting, I was always chasing the goal of doing a job that would make people smile. I joined a company in the bridal industry, and at first I was enthusiastic, submitting proposals and thinking up new ways to present things. But maybe I got carried away because I couldn't see any results. I couldn't negotiate well with my superiors, and I made a lot of mistakes. But I still couldn't give up. I can't forget the happy scenery from that time. I'll never lose the desire to one day produce an amazing space like that. Rachel, who had been lowering her eyes, slowly raised her head as if pondering the words. That's why I wanted this project to be a success. Even though people may say that a wedding on a ship is unusual and difficult, I thought I might be able to create the unforgettable wedding of my dreams. A one-of-a-kind dream wedding that would amaze everyone. But if things stay the way they are, it might not work out after all. I'm always rushing and exhausting those around me, and more than anything, I'm at my limit. Saying this, Rachel suddenly closes her lips. Rachel, it's true that a wedding on a ship is special, but maybe now is the time to take a step back and get everyone involved. Don't try to lead the whole thing by yourself. Trust each member of staff and assign them different tasks. If the initial arrangements are in order, the final result will surely be different. I told her in a calm voice while looking her in the eye. It is impossible to complete a luxurious full-course meal without first building a solid foundation. I thought that she would understand the meaning without me having to use cooking analogies. That's right. I think I was trying to carry everything on my own. I'm going to try to change the way I do things. I'm going to talk to the people around me and do what I can. Rachel smiled weakly, but a little light was beginning to return to her eyes. Maybe the pressure on her heart has been eased a little. By the way, what's your name again? I keep thinking of you as the dishwasher guy, but I don't think I ever asked. I hesitated for a second. But after everything we talked about, there was no reason to hide it. I'm Henry. Nice to meet you properly. I said it with a small smile, trying to shake off the awkwardness. Rachel reached out her hand. Okay, Henry. The moment our hands met, her grip was firm, full of a renewed determination. And from that day on, Rachel's approach to the project began to change. Previously, Rachel would unilaterally impose her ideas on the staff, causing them to make a lot of noise, but now she seems to have decided to start by visualizing the flow of people and schedules. First, a simple information session was held for all staff to share information about the onboard wedding plan. A large monitor was set up in a corner of the hallway, and Rachel herself held the microphone to act as the host. Even the staff, who had previously thought that weddings had nothing to do with them, were given a chance to see in detail what kind of production plans they had in mind and how the day would proceed. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the basic timetable. I've put together here the start time of the wedding ceremony, the flow of the reception that follows, and what each department will be responsible for. As you can see, I'm also planning to incorporate new production methods that make use of the facilities on board. On the screen, a color-coded PDF displayed the entire schedule from morning to night. The previously scattered information was compiled, and even the smallest details, such as cooking times in the kitchen, the order of serving food, the routes taken by the camera crew, and even the allocation of waiting rooms were given shape. At first, many staff members had acted like this had nothing to do with them, but once they saw Rachel's materials, their attitudes started to shift. Some even began offering practical suggestions such as, wouldn't it be better to use the main hall for this? And if the hallway gets crowded, we should station staff here to guide people. Rachel immediately noted down their feedback on her tablet. She had once been rigid in her approach, but now she was actively listening and eager to learn from others. We reached out to the ship's cleaning team, who are often thought of as outsiders, and the staff who usually handle entertainment for passengers, and had many discussions asking, can we create a playful production like this? Her openness had a ripple effect. Now, staff members were asking more detailed questions. Shouldn't we adjust this part, and where will the costume changes take place? For Rachel, these interactions take time, but it is clear that they are helping her improve her cooperation with those around her. Later, I heard a staff member happily say, I consulted Rachel and she listened carefully and made improvements. And I secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Certainly, there are still many problems to be solved, but the atmosphere on the ship has become much brighter thanks to Rachel's flexible response. Then some couples were officially holding weddings on Summit. The feedback was glowing. It was even more dramatic than I imagined, and it felt like something out of a movie, unforgettable. Word spread and inquiries about shipboard weddings started increasing through word of mouth and social media. Summit had always been a top-tier cruise, but now it was also gaining a reputation for its exclusive, breathtaking weddings. Even the higher-ups saw this as a major opportunity to boost the ship's prestige. One afternoon, just after the lunch rush, I was elbow-deep in dishes, battling the never-ending pile in the sink. Water splattered across the kitchen floor, making every step a careful one. With the heat and humidity in the kitchen, sweat formed on my forehead within minutes. Just as I reached for another plate, a familiar voice rang out. "Henry, are you here?" I turned to see Rachel standing at the kitchen entrance, scanning the room before striding toward me. Her eyes were shining with excitement. I quickly finished rinsing off a plate and set it aside before wiping my hands on a towel. "What's wrong? Another problem?" When I asked her while wiping off some of the sweat, Rachel shook her head and denied that it was a problem. And her eyes were sparkling with excitement. It was as if some big news had just come in. "It's not a problem, it's a great opportunity." As I took off my rubber gloves and adjusted my apron, I asked back, "An opportunity?" Her breathing was quick and her cheeks were slightly red, and it wasn't just because she had been running. It seems like she can't contain her happiness or excitement. "I just got a call. Apparently, there is a VIP who is considering holding their wedding on our ship, Summit, and they really want to do it. You see, it's quite unusual to hold a wedding on our ship, but the bride and groom are. Someone very big. I haven't heard the details yet, but I think it may be because the ship's reputation and our wedding services are gradually becoming a hot topic." She still didn't have all the details, but it seemed the ship's rising reputation had caught the attention of someone influential. In recent weeks, Summit's weddings had been gaining traction, with couples raving about their experiences online. It wasn't surprising that word had reached high-profile circles. And if the plan goes through, the ship's management has said they will fully support it. If it's successful, our reputation will skyrocket, so this is a golden opportunity. I glanced at her while arranging the freshly washed dishes on the rack. Before anyone knew it, Rachel had completely changed the way she worked and, together with her staff, created a way to liven up the on-set atmosphere. Although she had a lot of trouble at first, I think she is now building up the trust and ability to accomplish this big job. That's great. I didn't think such a big opportunity would come so soon. It's gonna be a lot of work, but you've got this. Yeah, thanks. With those words, Rachel dashes out of the kitchen. I watched her go, then turned back to the mountain of dishes with a small smile. The following week, the identity of the VIP was revealed. Kyle Mitchell, the heir to Mitchell Holdings, had officially requested a wedding on Summit. Mitchell Holdings is known as one of the largest investment groups in the country. The heir, Kyle, is at the forefront of business at a young age and is known as a capable businessman who has connections with celebrities overseas. His financial resources and connections are truly top-notch. Such a person is eager to hold a wedding on board the Summit. Whether they liked it or not, a sense of expectation and excitement spread throughout the ship. The pressure was immeasurable for Rachel, the ship's wedding planner, but to make matters worse, she received a message from Kyle's side saying, "We absolutely want to leave the cooking to the chef, Sean." Sean was a celebrity chef, constantly in the spotlight on TV and in magazines, and was now considered a superstar in the industry. Although he stood out for his flashy host-like appearance and nonchalant attitude, he was known for his skill. However, his personality was another matter. His arrogance and sharp tongue had caused problems more than once. I never thought they would nominate Sean. Honestly, I was surprised. We are grateful for that, but on the other hand, there are many hurdles to overcome, such as the ship's equipment and fire regulations. Rachel muttered as she slumped her shoulders in the hallway, holding her tablet. Bringing in an elite chef had obvious advantages, but the constraints of a luxury cruise ship's kitchen could cause major conflicts. If Sean demanded a top-tier, restaurant-grade environment, trouble was inevitable. Unlike a large, land-based kitchen, the ship had strict regulations and limited space. Well, I guess we'll just have to work together and make it happen. At my words, Rachel exhaled deeply, her expression serious. Honestly, I feel a lot of pressure because it's a wedding that could attract the attention of celebrities from all over the world. If Sean is coming, it will become even more of a topic of conversation. And if we can pull this off, I think we can prove to everyone that a wedding on a ship is possible. I don't have much time left, so I just have to do my best to the best of my ability. Her eyes burned with determination, surpassing any lingering fear. The day of Sean's site inspection arrived. Apparently having boarded the ship in the afternoon, he quickly looked around the captain's quarters and the hall before coming to the kitchen with a somewhat dissatisfied look on his face. At that time, I had just finished washing the dishes and was in the middle of wiping the sink, but I couldn't help but look at Sean standing next to the head chef and Rachel. The rumors were true, his flashy suit and glittering watch were impossible to ignore. So this is Summit's kitchen? Smaller than I expected. Sean snorted and just looked at the cooking utensils hanging on the wall without even picking them up. Even though Thomas bowed his head and said, "We will support you as much as we can," his face showed irritation as if saying, "I'm not satisfied with these facilities. My cooking can't be replicated without perfect temperature control and the right equipment." "Well, I might think about it if you ask me. Isn't that right, Rachel?" His gaze lingered on her, his tone dripping with flirtation. The atmosphere in the kitchen turned ice cold as the staff exchanged uneasy glances. But Rachel, bound by Kyle's request, forced a polite smile and bowed. "Please, Sean. Kyle specifically requested your full-course meal. It would mean a lot to him." Well, I don't dislike it as a business. I wonder what extent this ship can handle. I don't have high expectations, but I'm willing to help out. At this, even Thomas and the other chefs struggled to hide their irritation. But as for Rachel, the key to this project is whether or not she can fulfill the VIP's request. If we refused or offended Sean, the entire project could fall apart. Sean took out his phone from the inside pocket of his suit and talked to someone, then said, "Well, I'll contact you again," and retreated to the waiting room. "I'm sorry for making everyone feel uncomfortable. I'm going to the waiting room to support Sean." Saying this, she bowed to the staff and Thomas, then headed towards the waiting room. At that moment, Thomas asked me, "Sorry, but could you bring some drinks to Sean?" So I put a cold drink and some snacks on a tray and headed to the waiting room. I was about to protest, "Why me?" but realized the kitchen was still busy and the other staff were tied up. I wasn't exactly thrilled, but I grabbed the tray with a cold drink and some light snacks and made my way to the waiting room. As I reached the door, I heard voices from inside. Sean was speaking to Rachel, but from the tone of his voice, it didn't sound like a productive conversation. When I knocked, a lazy voice answered, "Come in," so I opened the door timidly. The air in the room was thick with tension. Rachel stood, tablet clutched to her chest, trying to explain something. But Sean, slouched deep into the sofa, showed zero interest. He sat back on the sofa, smiling as he played with his phone, occasionally casting a grinning glance at Rachel. It's as if he is more interested in her than in talking about work. Huh? Who's this? Sean noticed me and gave me an obviously unpleasant look. I'm sure it's not just my imagination that the atmosphere feels even worse the moment I enter the room. Excuse me, I've brought your drink. When I called out to him timidly, Sean's eyes moved as if licking my entire body. With a somewhat mocking smile on his face, he leaned back in the sofa and put his phone down. Is it okay to let such a low-level worker into the room? I'm having an important conversation with you and I don't want him to interrupt me. As he spoke in a venomous tone, a provocative smile was plastered on Sean's profile. Rachel hurriedly tried to explain, Sean, this is the staff, but he ignored her completely and continued to look at me with utter contempt. Hey Rachel, I came here to talk to you. I don't have time to waste on some low-level worker. Hearing that, even I couldn't help but feel irritated. But snapping back at him wouldn't do me any good. Considering Rachel's position, I couldn't afford to start any unnecessary trouble. I tried to keep my voice as calm as possible and simply said, excuse me. I'll leave it on the table, so please help yourself, and gently placed the tray on the side table. Rachel shot me an apologetic look. She was probably trying her best not to provoke him. Swallowing my frustration, I left the waiting room. In the end, I just walked away from the room. About 30 minutes later, I heard that Sean had left the ship as well. When I ran into Rachel later, she looked completely drained, exhaustion written all over her face. And the next day, the kitchen was thrown into utter chaos. Rachel rushed in, clutching her tablet, and delivered a shocking announcement. Sean had sent in a flood of new demands. Sean asked me to review the kitchen equipment. He said we should lift the restrictions on the use of fire and make the storage method for ingredients the same as restaurants on land. He also asked that we order some special ingredients for this date and time. Special ingredients? We're on the ocean. Some things are easy to prepare, but there are limitations to transportation routes and refrigerator capacity. And we can't even use fire freely. Thomas and the chefs buried their heads in their hands, while the rest of the kitchen staff looked completely lost. Every demand ignored food safety regulations and the ship's safety standards. One by one, people muttered, "This is impossible," but Rachel just kept taking notes and said, "I'll try to negotiate," bowing her head. All I could do was silently watch as the kitchen grew tense with stress. The demands were unlike anything we'd ever faced, and everyone was shaken. In the evening, when the work in the washing area was finished, I went out into the hallway and found Rachel leaning against the wall, her shoulders shaking slightly. The weight she was carrying was almost palpable. "Rachel, are you okay? Don't push yourself too hard." When I spoke gently, she turned to me with a face on the verge of tears. Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears, ready to spill at any moment. What should I do? Such an impossible task. No one can do it. I can't refuse because I absolutely have to make this wedding a success. Her voice wasn't just frustrated anymore, it was filled with desperation. I found myself at a loss for words. Objectively speaking, Sean's demands were completely unrealistic. It was clear he didn't understand the limitations of being on a ship, nor did he seem willing to be cooperative. Is this really okay? This isn't the kind of wedding you had in mind, is it? You've been forced to do something unreasonable and still have to keep bowing your head. At my words, Rachel bit her lip and finally her tears spilled over. I know, this is nothing like what I wanted. But what choice do I have? Tell me, what else can I do? Her last words came out as choked sobs. The endless demands, the crushing pressure, and her own dreams were tearing her apart. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to blame you. If there's anything I can do to help, I will. Just don't push yourself too hard. I gently placed a hand on her shoulder and said only that. Tears continued to fall down her cheeks as she gave a faint nod. It was as if she was barely holding on, desperately searching for some kind of salvation. In the days that followed, the ship's staff struggled to meet Sean's relentless demands, turning every day into a battlefield. Reassessing kitchen equipment, double-checking ingredient supply chains, and adjusting schedules to allow for more fire usage. Rachel worked tirelessly, stuck in the middle of it all. No matter how unreasonable the requests, she would always say, "I'll try to negotiate," and go talk to other departments or the ship's higher-ups. Even when she became the target of frustration and anger, she stood firm, trying to mediate and make things work. Because deep down, she was determined to make this wedding a success. Many of the staff, moved by the passion she showed in meetings and briefings, did their best to help. I was one of them. But with each passing day, it became more and more uncertain just how far our cooperation could go. It was becoming painfully clear that Sean was an extremely uncooperative person. Even when the staff tried to explain the difficulties they were facing, he either scoffed or refused to listen. Over the phone, he would often say things like, "If you can't meet my demands, then there's no point in hiring me," before abruptly hanging up. His attitude screamed as if to say, "You should be grateful that I'm even doing this." Frustration kept piling up and the atmosphere in the kitchen grew heavier by the day. Even from my station in the dishwashing area, I could feel the tension in everyone's strained expressions. Rachel was caught between a rock and a hard place many times, but she would convey Sean's requests, written on the tablet, to the ship's staff and bow her head. Watching her, I could see just how much pressure she was under. Whenever I checked in on her, she would only give me a weak smile and repeat, "I'm fine, I'll figure something out." But her exhausted eyes told a different story. And so, with all these unresolved problems still looming over us, the wedding day finally arrived. From the early morning, the cruise ship Summit was in full-on wedding mode. The interior was lavishly decorated with flowers and ribbons, and guests in formal attire bustled about. Among them were some who appeared to be overseas guests. They all marveled at the idea of a wedding on a ship, chatting excitedly about the food they were looking forward to. Laughter echoed throughout the ship, filling the air with a joyous atmosphere. But behind the scenes, there was no time for smiles. When I arrived at the kitchen early in the morning, Thomas, the chefs, and the other staff were already gathered, caught in absolute chaos. Everything was moving at a breakneck pace. From welcome drinks at the entrance to appetizers, soup, fish dishes, and finally, the main dish. Normally, the chef in charge of the main dish would be in charge of directing the scene, but Sean was nowhere to be seen. "Where's Sean? Didn't he say he'd be here for the morning prep?" "We can't reach him, and no one even knows when he was supposed to arrive on the ship. Does anyone have any idea?" "You've got to be kidding me. The ceremony starts in just a few hours." The staff murmured uneasily. The sense of dread was almost tangible. "What about Rachel? She should be able to get in touch with him, right?" Just as someone said that, Rachel appeared at the kitchen entrance. Her face was pale, and her hand holding the phone was trembling slightly. Even on her busiest days, she always managed to force a smile, but today she was visibly shaken. "So he really isn't coming." The staff behind her stirred anxiously at her words. Eventually, Thomas calls out to Rachel. "Rachel, what's going on? Is Sean not coming?" I just got through to him on the phone, but..." Rachel hesitated and her gaze crossed mine for a moment. There was no way to hide the despair written all over her face. "He told me that if I refused his invitation, he wouldn't cook." Then he hung up. The noise instantly quieted as if frozen. The staff exchanged confused glances, repeating his words, "Refused his invitation?" But no one dared to press further. I clenched my teeth, letting the meaning of her words sink in. Back in the waiting room, Sean had been openly flirting with Rachel, trying to push for something more personal. She had kept her distance, treating it as strictly business, and clearly, he hadn't taken that well. I never thought he would really not come. He's a professional chef, and I knew he would do his job properly. If only I had done something sooner. I'm sorry." Her voice trembled as she spoke, and then she collapsed to her knees on the floor. "Calm down, Rachel. We still have time before the ceremony starts, even if we have to find a replacement." Thomas was trying to think of a solution, but it was practically impossible to find a replacement at this point. Even for a usual chef, there was no way anyone could step in now, instantly grasp the menu, and execute the dishes flawlessly. The kitchen was in chaos. Sighs and murmurs of frustration filled the air, a collective feeling of "this is over" spreading through the staff. In the suffocating tension that filled the kitchen, I took a deep breath and spoke with conviction. "I'll cook. We can't let the guests suffer because of this." The entire kitchen froze. The low hum of the ventilation system was the only sound in the eerie silence. Everyone held their breath, staring at me as if their minds had gone blank. "What are you saying? You're just a dishwasher," someone shouted. Thomas's eyes widened in shock, and the other chefs voiced their disbelief. "Calm down, Henry. Cooking isn't something you can just step in and do. Sorry, but we can't afford to let an amateur screw up such an important event. No way we're letting you take over." A storm of objections erupted. To them, I was just a low-level kitchen hand. It was natural for them to react this way. I had never stood out or spoken up before, and now I was suddenly claiming I could replace a chef. Of course, they would resist. But there were things that had to be said. I took a deep breath, steeled myself, and revealed the truth. The truth is, I used to be the head chef at a 3-star restaurant in Paris. Thompson is my mother's maiden name, so my real name is Henry Jefferson. The kitchen fell into absolute silence, as if time itself had stopped. Then, in the next moment, murmurs spread like ripples through the staff. "No way. You're that Henry Jefferson? The youngest head chef they called a genius?" The whispers traveled across the entire kitchen. I, Henry Jefferson, had once been the youngest head chef at a prestigious 3-star restaurant in Paris. Being given such a position in my mid-20s was no accident. From the beginning, I studied hard every day without sparing a moment, and while absorbing traditional techniques under strict chefs, I also incorporated my own confident ideas. This eventually caught the attention of the store's higher-ups, who decided that young energy was needed to save the long-established store that was on the verge of falling into distress. And it worked. New menu concepts and special event plans I introduced quickly brought customers back. With that momentum, I was promoted to head chef at an unprecedented age. There was a time when I was reviving a traditional, long-established store and garnering attention from the industry. I was featured in the media and was climbing the ladder so smoothly that it even scared me. But at its peak, an allergen contamination incident occurred. One night at a banquet, a high-profile guest accidentally consumed an ingredient he was allergic to. Though he survived, the blame fell squarely on me as the head chef, and I was forced to leave the restaurant. Even after I disappeared from the public eye, rumors of Henry Jefferson being a dangerous chef continued to spread, and it was obvious that if I gave my real name, I would be immediately expelled. That was how I ended up here on the luxury cruise ship summit. I thought that working behind the scenes on a ship might allow me to keep cooking out of the public eye. I'd be lying if I said there was no self-preservation in that decision. However, I could not let go of my passion for cooking, so I changed my name and chose to start over as a dishwasher under the name Henry Thompson. And now, fate was moving again. Every eye in the kitchen was locked onto me. My chest tightened painfully, but I knew that if I stayed silent, nothing would change. I couldn't erase the past, but I refused to let anyone else's dreams fall apart because of it. I gathered all my resolve and raised my voice once more. Let me cook. If we just stand here doing nothing, the bride and groom who dreamed of this wedding will be the ones who suffer. At that moment, one of the mid-level chefs slammed his hand down on a table and stood up abruptly. His expression was fierce, almost like he was ready to bite my head off. Do you know how many people have been affected because of you? If I had known it was you, I would never have worked with you in the first place. What is this man who caused so much trouble for the industry saying? His anger was raw, and the tension in the room deepened. From a little further away, I could hear someone mutter, "That incident really was," in agreement. I took in their stares, bracing myself, clenching my teeth. It was true that I had caused fear and distrust in many people. But just as I stepped forward toward the cooking station, Thomas suddenly spread his arms wide, blocking my path. "You're not doing this on your own. This isn't just about you, Henry. This affects the entire ship's reputation. If something goes wrong, there will be no undoing it." Thomas's stern words made me falter for a moment. But if we did nothing, the bride and groom's most important day would be ruined. That was the one thing I absolutely couldn't allow. Just as I steeled myself again, a trembling voice spoke from the back. "That incident, it was my fault." I turned in shock to see a young apprentice chef clenching his trembling hands into fists. Back then, I was a rookie. I was completely overwhelmed by the VIP's demands, running on no sleep, and I accidentally used an allergenic ingredient. Henry didn't blame me at all. Instead, as the head chef, he took full responsibility for my mistake and resigned from the restaurant. Tears welled up in his eyes as he bowed deeply to the head chef and the rest of the staff. "Please, from me as well, let Henry cook for this ship." His words sent a ripple through the room. Even the mid-level chef who had been furious earlier averted his gaze, looking uncomfortable. The staff around me hesitated for a moment, but then they started working again without saying a word. It was as if they were showing their feelings by getting back to work, as if to say this wasn't the time to stand still. A warmth rose in my chest, and I felt my eyes sting. I struggled to find the right words, but Thomas, maintaining his stern expression, finally spoke in a firm, commanding voice. "You're the only one who can save us now. We're counting on you, Henry." I took a deep breath, pushing down the emotions swelling inside me, and nodded. "Of course, I'll make sure this succeeds." The apprentice who had just spoken up looked down, ashamed. "I'm so sorry for having put everything on you." I placed a hand gently on his shoulder, offering him a small smile. "It's okay. Don't dwell on it. What matters now is making this wedding a success. Thank you for speaking up and for helping." His tear-filled eyes widened slightly before he nodded repeatedly. "Yes, let's do this together." Straightening his back, he returned to his station, and the rest of the staff followed suit, moving with renewed determination. The entire kitchen was now united under a single goal to create the perfect wedding meal. From that moment on, the kitchen became a battlefield. We were already cutting it dangerously close on time. Despite the lingering anxiety, everyone worked in complete focus. From menu adjustments to ingredient prep, sauce making, and plating, everything had to be done simultaneously. Henry checked the sauce. Amuse-bouche is plated, moving on to the appetizers. Instructions flew across the room, accompanied by the sharp clang of pans and the fragrant steam rising in the air. Ordinarily, this much prep work would have been impossible to complete in time. But when everyone moved as one, the pace was entirely different. I tasted each dish as we went, making the necessary adjustments on the fly. Before I knew it, we had reached the final stage, the main dish. We had almost no time left. But beside me, Thomas muttered under his breath, "Impressive." Others echoed his sentiment, murmuring in awe. "This is only possible because everyone worked together. Thank you," I said, still focused as I put the finishing touches on the last sauce. Then, with one final stroke of precision, the full course was complete. We did it. A triumphant voice rang out, and in that instant, the entire kitchen erupted in cheers and applause. The atmosphere, which had felt like a battlefield, suddenly became charged with energy, and I could see staff members everywhere encouraging each other. From a little farther away, Thomas let out a deep sigh and murmured, "Good job, everyone." As I took in the energy of the room, I suddenly felt a gaze on me, Looking up, I saw Rachel standing nearby, still holding her tablet. She had been running around all day, but now her tear-filled eyes were locked on me. Her lips trembled slightly, as if she had lost the ability to form words, but then she broke into a radiant smile. "Henry, thank you. Thanks to you, we managed to save the wedding." Her voice shook, filled with relief and overwhelming gratitude. Wiping the sweat from my brow, I let out a small, wry smile. "No, I should be the one thanking you. There's no way I could have done this alone. We only made it because everyone worked together." Rachel closed her eyes for a moment, then hugged her tablet tightly and said, "I'm heading to the venue," before rushing out of the kitchen. As I watched her retreating figure, I thought about the dishes being carried out. Right about now, the reception must be in full swing. Just imagining it filled my chest with warmth. And soon enough, my instincts were proven right. The full-course meal was met with overwhelming reviews, with people all over saying things like, "I've never tasted such delicate flavors before, and I can't believe that such quality can be achieved in a ship's kitchen," and reports of the bride and groom smiling with tears in their eyes. The staff erupted in cheers and sighs of relief, and I let out a deep breath, finally able to relax. As the wedding wrapped up, Kyle personally came to the kitchen, clapping loudly for everyone. It was a truly wonderful dish. I was surprised that someone other than Sean could make such delicious food. No, it may have been even better than that. He extended his hand toward me, his gaze filled with respect and gratitude. Feeling a bit overwhelmed, I straightened my back and firmly shook his hand. On the other hand, Sean, who ended up not showing up, apparently faced heavy criticism from the industry as soon as it was made public that he had skipped the ceremony and canceled it for personal reasons. Abandoning his job is the worst thing he can do. No matter how good he is, we can't trust him, and other comments like these continue to come in, and Sean's reputation has plummeted both inside and outside the industry. To make matters worse, rumors spread that Mitchell Holdings had officially terminated all contracts with him. Sponsors and backers are also pulling out one after another, and his past arrogant behavior and even sexual harassment of female staff members are coming to light one after another. With a history of problematic behavior, once his credibility was lost, there was no recovering. Hearing all this, I didn't feel much of anything. What mattered more than his downfall was how many people had smiled because of this wedding on Summit. And in the days that followed, that success only continued to grow. Word spread through reviews and social media, and wedding inquiries skyrocketed. The ship's staff, eager to make each event even better, strengthened their teamwork, making for busy but fulfilling days. Then, out of nowhere, Mitchell Holdings reached out with a new proposal. "We would love to entrust all of our projects to you," they said. They wanted me to take over all the projects Sean had been handling. It was a massive offer to oversee everything, not just on the ship, but also at land-based restaurants and private events. "Are you sure about this?" "Me?" I asked Kyle when he approached me with the offer. He simply smiled, as if surprised I would even question it. No, after eating the food at that ceremony, anyone would want to hire you. I want you to demonstrate not only your skills, but also your attitude of getting the people around you involved in the work at our company." As I struggled to process the unexpected recognition, Kyle's expression remained warm but firm. "You already have the network, the reputation, and the platform. All that's left is for you to make the decision to stop running away." I bit my lip. I once turned my back on this world because of an allergy contamination incident, but this time I wonder if I can really stick to my ways. I keep asking myself this question, but it was none other than my shipmates who gave me the push I needed. What's there to think about? Exactly. If they're asking you, that means they see your worth. You're already our pride as a chef, aren't you? Hearing their unwavering support, I knew I had to answer them. The moment I resolved to fully dedicate myself to cooking once again, the lingering doubts in my chest faded away. In this way, the recipes and suggestions I have created are not only available on ships, but are also being used at land-based facilities and corporate parties. With Kyle's network, the scale of projects became exponentially larger, bringing new challenges but also greater excitement. And through it all, Rachel remained as busy as ever, managing wedding plans. She was constantly on the move, coordinating between departments and coming up with new ideas. Yet, there was a certain confidence in her eyes now, a certainty that hadn't been there before. Whenever she spotted me, she would take a brief pause, exhale slightly, and smile. I didn't think I'd get so many requests for wedding ceremonies, but I guess it's a happy cry. One day, I'd like to hold a wedding ceremony here with the person I love. Still holding her tablet, she turned to look at me. The soft lighting of the ship cast a gentle glow on her face, and her eyes shimmered with sincerity. For someone always buried in work, it was rare for her to say something so personal. "That sounds nice. I'm sure it would be an incredible wedding." I tried to respond as naturally as possible, but I couldn't ignore the subtle quickening of my heartbeat. Rachel let out a small breath as she watched my uncertain smile, then slowly reached out her hand. The moment our fingertips touched, a faint spark ran through me like a tiny jolt of electricity. Right? Starting a new chapter with someone you love right here on this ship, it sounds like a dream, doesn't it? Yeah, it really does. It would be an amazing wedding. That was all I could manage to say. The warmth in my palm sent an unexpected heat through my chest. Rachel smiled in satisfaction before turning and jogging off to her next task. All that remained was the faint trace of her scent and the lingering warmth in my hand. I stood there for a while, unable to move, savoring the moment. Our story was only just beginning. We would continue bringing joy to the people on this ship. And someday, we would make our own dreams come true. Let's continue to learn for that purpose. I vowed to myself as I was bathed in the orange light.